my concern when I hear this is, wow, like you've gone this far and you haven't really truly tested whether or not you want to be a physician. Ask the Dean, episode 11, back with Team Maps with Dr. Scott Wright. How are you today?
Hello, hello, hello. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Rocking and a rolling. And Rachel Grubbs, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm here. I'm good.
Here, alive. Here, answering some questions. Let's talk about Mapped for a minute. Obviously, we're live streaming into our Mapped beta group. Obviously, this is going to go out live to YouTube later. So, hello, YouTube world, later on. We had a big update to Mapped today. More kind of back-end stuff to make sure that once we open up the floodgates, things don't hit a brick wall. But one cool feature that we finally got in there was that students can start adding their own classes. So that's a nice little feature that we needed. Rachel, talk about why we just don't let students enter whatever they want for courses.
Yeah, so we want to standardize the data as much as we can, and it's a couple things. So part of it is long-term. We think that's actually going to save you guys time, right? Because it's a lot easier and better to type part of a course name and just have the real thing pop right up so you can pick it and go, yeah, that's it. But it's also because long-term, what we want to do is help you guys make the transition from Mapped into your application services. And we want to make sure that when that's happening, that we're picking courses that we have found and verified in the course catalog. Now, that's not the same as the application services actually verifying you, but we're trying to make it so that the data you're entering is as close to right as possible. And then ultimately, what we hope it will do too is pay forward to future users. So if we see the same pre-meds over and over, picking the same chem and bio and physics classes, then future students from your school, they're going to say, hey, I went to UF and type in chem, and it's going to go, did you mean chem 2053? Or I don't know if that's the right number, but it's going to
54, close enough.
Immediately pop up and go, I bet you took this course. Is this the one? So we hope it'll help you guys who are helping us, beta test, who have taken this lovely chance on us as a pre-orders, but continue to pay forward more in year after year. So the system just gets more and more streamlined, easier and easier to use.
Yeah. I don't know if either of you have used, and if you're listening to this, watching this, used any sort of like diet tracking, meal tracking apps. Like I'll go to add like a half a can or half a cup of black beans, and I look up the brand, and there's like 500 entries from the same brand, from the same beans, and they're all off by like 1 calorie or 10 grams of carbs. Like they're all different. Like, how is this not standardized? So it's always so frustrating. So when we started thinking about this, I'm like, no, we have to standardize this. I'm excited. Hopefully this week, as we're recording this, we're going to let in a few hundred more people. That's the plan. So stay tuned. We have some work to do until then, but things are moving. I'm excited. Moving and shaking. And I was working on some algorithms. I don't know if either of you had a chance to look at those Word docs yet, or those Google Docs yet. But I thought we would start easy, right? And easy, like with the MCAT. Because students, once we know the start date of medical school, we can go, hey, the ideal time to take the MCAT is between September, so let's assume 2025 is the start date of medical school. We can say, hey, try taking the MCAT somewhere between September and April. September of 2023 and April of 2024, right? Is a very general timeline that a lot of students use. And Rachel, I want your MCAT expertise to weigh into these algorithms too. And so we can say, you can take it later, but here are some issues, and so on and so forth, and you really give the feedback on why we recommend taking it during that time, etc. So that's the fun stuff. The juices are flowing. All right. We have any questions yet? Oh, so here's a Maps question. Is there a secondary feature in Mapped? So right now, all of the secondary questions are still on the medical school HQ.net website. We actually need to go through an update for 2020 as those secondaries have come out. A lot has changed. So Honestly, right now, go to Reddit, go to SDN, and follow the school-specific threads for the most up-to-date secondaries. And we'll get those updated on the Medical School HQ website. And then, yes, in the school list option, there will be the secondaries in there as we go. And just know, right, those are manually updated every year, unfortunately. Schools, and maybe we develop relationships with schools and they give them to us early. But we'll see about that. All right. Got any questions yet? Is it fine to disclose your religious denomination in a secondary essay to Christian or non-Christian schools? Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a lot of obviously when you're an admissions officer at a medical school, you read a lot of applications and read a lot of essays, and this is not an uncommon concern for students and question that students have in my experience. And I think it is fine to disclose what your religious background is within the context of understanding that your reader doesn't know who you are. They're trying to figure out who you are. And your reader may have a different religious background, may have no religious background. So you want to be careful in terms of how you talk about what religion means to you and how that affects your interest in going into medicine. Because you want to be careful not to. I'm not dissuading you from being open about who you are, but I am saying you just need to recognize that your reader is coming from a different standpoint in many cases. They may be a different denomination. If it's a Christian denomination, they may be a totally different religion, or as I said, no religion at all. They may be, an atheist or whatever. So you have to keep that in mind and keep in mind that they will be reading this trying to figure out what are your motivations for going into medicine. One of the concerns that some admissions committee members will have is your effort to go into medicine a proselytizing effort? Are you going to be trying to, with your patients, do other than medical things once you're practicing medicine? And this may not be a big issue, but it is sometimes in the mind of readers, particularly if you're very strong and there's a lot of religiosity in your application. And I'm not talking about participating in activities and doing things like that, but I've read application essays where the applicant said, God told me to be a doctor. God instructed me that this is my pathway and this is what I should do. And that's a little strong, I think. I think many people who don't come from the same religious background maybe that you're coming from wouldn't understand that at all. And that may scare them. It may they may question, what does that mean? How is that going to affect you both as a medical student and ultimately as a physician? So I would say proceed with caution, be yourself, be let the people on the admissions committees know what are things that motivate you, but just be aware that they don't know you. They can't sit there and necessarily talk to you until the interview. And you don't want to provide any red flags that will cause them to question whether or not you would be a good fit in medicine in general or at their school specifically.
Yeah, I think there's a risk, especially right now. There seems to be, and obviously this is more Facebook, social media directed, but it seems that a large majority of like the anti-mask and everything going on right now with COVID-19, a lot of them are very, very, very religious people. Mm-hmm. Right. And very early on, like, aren't you scared of COVID? No, I have the blood of Jesus on me. And so if that is the kind of stuff, and not to say that those people are wrong, but that's the kind of stuff that you have to keep in mind when you are writing your essay, to go, this is the picture of what religion kind of is right now. Right. And it does that in the admissions committee's mind. Does that potentially benefit me or hinder me? And so just keeping that in mind on kind of what the kind of tone of religion is in this country right now, or at least what the media portrays it to be, especially with what's going on with COVID and the pandemic and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, we have a kind of interesting one. It's long. It's in 2 parts. So part 1.
All right. Part 1. Hey, everyone. Sorry to start the show with a rather intricate question, but I really need some help. So the doctor of a clinic I volunteer at has been under investigation by the DEA. Now, the doctor let me know the prosecutor chose not to proceed with the case and dropped it, but the detectives still want to have the doctor charged. Also, this doctor is going up in front of our state's medical licensing board in a few months because of a complaint was filed against her license.
Okay, part 2.
Part 2. My question is, should I continue to volunteer there? I have learned so much from this doctor, and in my heart, I feel they aren't guilty of anything they have been accused of. But at the same time, I don't want to be tied up in anything that could hurt my chances at medical school.
Wow.
Woo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my initial reaction to that is I don't think there's a reason not necessarily to continue to volunteer there. My feeling is that there's a lot of richness here that can go into an essay about what you learned about medicine and what you learned about practicing medicine. That this is important stuff, and that the government is keeping doctors accountable. And we've all seen played out in front of us the opioid crisis, where doctors and pharmacists have been charged and in some cases imprisoned because of their unethical and illegal activities. And I think there's a richness here to talking about what you learned through not just volunteering there about their patient interactions and how patients were doing and how the doctor related to them and all the medical stuff. But there's a richness here in terms of what you learned about these other issues that the doctors have to deal with on a perhaps daily basis in terms of practicing medicine. So
Yep.
I love the idea of what you've learned out of all this. I mean, it's fascinating. If I was a reader of an application and I saw this in an essay, I would be like, man, I want to sit down and talk to this student. I want to hear more.
So
about this.
you like gossip, don't you?
Yeah. Well, obviously you don't want to. You don't want to divulge who the doctor is in an essay. So you have to be careful. You don't want to spread rumors about a particular physician that they would be able to connect that to. So you'd have to be very careful in terms of how you would approach it in your essay or whatever. But I think that if you've learned a lot in this experience volunteering, then I think that's great. If this is obviously your only experience volunteering, then I think you need other experiences too with other physicians to see how their practice runs and how they practice medicine, and then you would get a greater context for not only understanding what this doctor was accused of and how you felt about that, but also just in terms of their practice of medicine in general. Ryan, what are your thoughts about this?
in this country, innocent until proven guilty, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But it's not a normal occurrence for detectives to be hanging around the doctor's office and for people to go to the state board to have their license looked at.
Right.
So
it's unusual. Yeah.
In my mind, there's something sketchy going on. Whether it's still legal but super sketchy. I've watched legal TV shows, so I'm basically a lawyer right now. So right, the prosecutor dropping the case or not pursuing charges doesn't mean anything. It just means that they, in their mind, don't think they can win that battle, and so it doesn't mean that they're not guilty or whatever. Basically, in my mind, if you can find someone else to shadow and get some experience, I probably would. And don't go down with that ship. It's a good experience on what not to do. But yeah, it's interesting. And obviously you have built a relationship with this person, or the student has built a relationship with this person. And so it's hard to kind of separate yourself, right? You hear whenever there's a tragedy and people are like, oh, I never knew that person could do that thing. Well, no, because you look through a different lens. So it's hard to separate those feelings from seeing, and you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes, and if they're double billing or whatever they're doing, potentially illegal. I don't know, but it's very interesting. Basically, at the end of the day, it's shadowing this person or volunteering with this person, whatever you're doing, likely for like as much as possible is not going to hurt you for application to medical school. Nobody's going to go, how could you volunteer for that person? You must be guilty by association, right? They're not going to go that far.
No, exactly.
Non-traditional student here. Hello, non-trad. My divorce played an integral role in my decision to change my course to medical school. Is there a way to bring this up without raising too many red flags? Obviously not planning to speak ill of my former partner. Yes, that's good. Don't speak ill of former people. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think what medical schools, it depends a little bit on what the context is for where you're discussing this. If it's a secondary essay about difficult circumstances, then that would make total sense to me, that the divorce was difficult and that you really learned a lot through experiencing that, etc. So I could see, you talking about it within that context, and particularly if it's in your personal statement, if that's what motivated you, or partially what motivated you to, as you put, change the course of your life and go into medicine, then you have to talk about it. That's the seed that we talk about in part, that really is a chief sort of is part of the chief genesis for why you're doing this and what's going on, especially since you're a non-traditional student. Potentially, I would guess maybe a second career student who's changing careers completely. They're really going to want to know what is it that went on that really caused you to go through this. And I think you can do that in an appropriate way, without, as you said, trashing your partner, and do that in a way where you learned a lot, and you really, and this is what kind of led you to sort of turn over new leaves in your life, et cetera. So I would encourage you to do that. This is the kind of thing that admissions committees really want to know more about. And it makes you, in my view, what I like to say is what they're looking for is three-dimensional people. They want to see that there are many dimensions to you as a person, and that this is part of who you are, that in particular that led you into going down the route of medical school.
Quarantine is making me more three-dimensional.
Yes.
all this eating I'm doing, and
I know.
more three-dimensional.
Is that why you were on the diet apps that you mentioned earlier?
No, I need to be on the diet apps, and I don't use them. I need to be. My concern when I hear this is, and I see it a lot, which is why it kind of triggers me a little bit to talk about this, is a lot of times people will try to tie together an event to why they want to be a doctor. And when I read it, I said, these two, like, they don't go together. And you're trying to force them together to say, my divorce led me to want to be a physician. Well, why? Right? That whole reflection and all of that. Right. Well, I was in a point where I was just lost and didn't know what to do with my life, so I wanted to be a doctor. Again, those kinds of relationships don't go together.
Don't make sense, yeah.
You really have to make sure that why you're choosing medicine makes sense. And so obviously if there was a part of the divorce that plays into that, right, and kind of being tongue-in-cheek, right, a little joking, because that's my nature, is like, oh, like I'm getting a divorce, because my wife cheated on me with a physician, and and now I want to be a doctor so that my next wife won't leave me, right? That obviously that doesn't make sense either, but just poking fun. But you have to really figure out why physician from that story, and make sure, because I see this all the time with students, is they try to show, oh, my divorce shows resilience, and so I really need to tell that story in my personal statement. And that's being resilient is a good trait of being a physician, and therefore I should be a doctor, right? And just students try to make these connections that just make no sense, and it's just at the end of the day, I'm done reading it going, okay, so why do you want to be a doctor? So just be careful with that. Oh, I graduate college in December, and that's when I plan to start gaining some clinical experience as a caregiver/CNA. I plan to apply next cycle. Will the fact that I started clinical experience 5 months before submitting my application be a red flag? Scott, this is what MAPT is for.
Yeah, this is exactly what MAPT is for.
So MAPT would be, I'm planning to start medical school in 2022, which means you're applying in 2021, and MAPT would go, ding, ding, ding. Like, you have no clinical experience yet. What's going on? It's a red flag.
So the first thing that really, and I agree with you, Ryan, that this is the very thing that MAPT would raise as an issue, and try and seek to guide the student to doing those things. And in my mind, what this question hollers out to me is that this student is trying to check a box.
That's what it looks like on the back end.
Yeah. That you've obviously wanted to be a doctor for a long time and didn't feel the necessity to get any clinical experience, to do anything to check to see that your motivations were pure, to make sure that this is a pathway you really want to go down, to make sure that you understand what medicine is really all about. And so 5 months before it, you're like, oh, well, I better check this box so that I can make sure the admissions committee won't think I'm a flake or something. Yep. And so that I think could be an issue. I think, yes, the answer to your question is I think it could be a red flag.
Yeah. And obviously there are lots of reasons why students don't get clinical experience early, right? Maybe they have to work to support family, and that work is outside of clinical experience, and with classes and work and taking care of family, they don't have time to juggle it all. But that's kind of why gap years were invented, right? To spend that time. And my concern when I hear this is, wow, like you've gone this far and you haven't really truly tested whether or not you want to be a physician.
Yeah.
It's just this idea in your head, this romanticized idea of like, one day I'm going to be a doctor. I don't really know why I say that because I haven't really put myself around patients.
But they've been binging Grey's Anatomy for years.
But great, just like my lawyer shows, right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm a lawyer now. Yeah, so that's my biggest question. And yes, right, at the end of the day, it looks like you're checking the box, whether you're meaning to check that box or not. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And exactly why MAPT is there, so we can warn students early and often, so they don't fall into that trap.
Yep, exactly.
On the topic of religiosity, I served as a proselytizing mission in Texas from 2015 to 2017, but also volunteered at homeless shelters, food banks, etc. for a couple hundred hours while there. Would those service hours be looked upon any differently if reported in the context of a religious mission? Ooh, interesting.
Well, so particularly since I have a lot of experience in Texas, and we get and this is an assumption, and I'm going to put this out there. This is an assumption.
We know what those do.
I know, but if it's true, that this is probably a Latter-day Saints student who goes on their 2-year mission to do their thing while they're in college, and that while they're and we see this a lot, I've seen this many times. It's not unusual. I would say that's not a problem. I'm encouraged by the fact that you reached out while you were doing your mission to do volunteer work and at food banks and other things. That's encouraging that you really have a heart for people, and that, you know, helping people is the main motivation for why you're wanting to go into medicine. So I don't think that this is going to be a problem. I mean, I think as long as the admissions committee or the reader of your application is clear that there is a separation between the two, that your proselytizing mission is for the purpose of talking to people about your religion, about your experience in your religious context, but that the other section of that you're doing is outside of that, is through the food bank and through whatever other activities you were doing, that was not, you know, that the two were not necessarily connected. And I'm not suggesting necessarily that we can totally separate ourselves from, you know, these things and kind of block off one section of our life and then do something else. And I don't think admissions committees expect that will be the case. But so in answer to your question, in my experience, no, I don't think that will be an issue. We see a lot of applicants who, not only in terms of due to your mission, but they go on mission trips to various parts of the world, and they do things within the context of their religious experience through, you know, many food banks, many free clinics are religious-based clinics or are religious-based food banks, such as Salvation Army or other things. And so I don't think it's as clear cut as I meant to probably suggest earlier, but I think
Well, Scott, let me reframe it a little bit, because I think the question is a little bit different from that, and I'll add a little bit more context from some other students who I've talked to. So I potentially think the question more is not from the religious standpoint, but because I'm doing these activities as part of the church, or let me add more context to frame it differently. For student athletes in school, a lot of times philanthropy is built into being a student athlete, and they go and they do lots of extracurricular activities and stuff like that. If I'm doing these activities because I'm a student athlete, or because I'm part of a sorority or fraternity and it's part of what we do, does that take away from, right? Do you give me less credit for what I'm doing because it's kind of mandatory? I think that's where that question was leading to.
Well, okay, so I would say two things about that. Number one is I don't think that would be necessarily sufficiently clear to an admissions committee, that the activities that you participated in were mandatory because you were a varsity athlete, or because you were because what you're going to be what they're looking for is this talking about meaning that you gain from those experiences. It's not necessarily that because I'm a varsity athlete, we all went to some children's hospital and passed out footballs or pom-poms or whatever. What the admissions committee is looking for, that's great, but what they're looking for is so what? Who cares that you did that? What did you gain out of that experience? What did you learn from that experience? That's the real substance that the committees are looking for. And I think the same thing applies in this case. Whether the volunteering at the homeless shelters, food banks, et cetera, was a mandatory part of what you were doing, or whether it was not, what we're really looking for is, so what? A lot of people volunteered at homeless shelters. A lot of people do food banks. There's tons of applicants in the applicant pool that do all those things. What difference did it make to you? What was the impact of this on you and on your goal of being in medicine and serving other people? That's the key.
Yeah. I watch have you ever watched The Good Place, Scott?
I've watched it a couple of times. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good show.
It's so good. We binged it. Binge when you have kids and jobs and stuff. Binging is like one episode a night.
Yeah.
But that was our nightly TV show for a few weeks. And right at the end of the day, the algorithm basically, do you get into heaven or do you not? Is what were the intentions behind the act? And and I think the kind of what you're getting to is really from the admission standpoint. Right, everyone's intention is kind of ill-conceived, right? I want to get into medical school, so I'm doing all of these things. So everyone's intentions are kind of not the best anyway. So just because you have to do it for whatever purpose, whether it's church or sports or
whatever
Greek life, then it's what are you making of it? Even after that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key. That's the key.
I'm glad I got my my good life reference in. I'm gonna make it a thing. Every episode, I need a good life reference.
The Good Place. I thought it was The Good Place.
Oh, The Good Place. The Good Place. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. You've obviously binged it quite a bit.
Hey, season 4, I think, is coming out on Netflix.
I'm gonna have to start binging it. Yeah.
It's so good.
That reminded me I need to do that.
Yeah. Season 1 was great, and then it hit a lull, and then it picked back up. It was much better.
Yeah. Good.
All right. What else we got?
Oh, there's quite a few over here.
I think Rachel's talking, but we can't hear because she's not on the stream.
Well, I tried. We have a question in our private chat. I didn't want to.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask that one.
Yeah.
I saw it. I forgot it was there. So a student is asking, I lost my scribing job in March due to COVID and finally got another job this past month, but it is not medically related or medical related. I'm a postbac paying for my classes, and this opportunity is great financially, but I worry it will look bad to have a non-medical job. Is there a way to work this to my advantage?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that, if you look at, and again, I don't suggest that students, ponder the AAMC personal characteristics and core competencies, endlessly. But I do think knowing a little bit about them is valuable. And I think if you look at those core competencies, they're not all just medically related competencies. These are human competencies. These are competencies that we want to see in people that we interact with, that we want to see in our friends and family members. There are things like compassion and ethical standards and things like communication skills and interpersonal skills. And so I think these can be expressed in ways outside of medically related jobs. So I definitely think that there's a richness in being able to talk about those things in the work that you've done, whether it's a medically related job or not. You can talk about how I experienced this, event in my work, and it really focused me on a particular character trait that I really want to talk about, and that's important to me, and that I think will be valuable in medical school and eventually as a physician. And really, I think that we can learn these types of things through a variety of experiences in our lives. So I don't think that it's certainly not going to look bad. COVID has done a lot of bad things to a lot of the population of the United States, and we have talked about this many times on the Ask the Dean broadcast. In terms of medical schools are very aware of this, and a lot of medical schools are asking about this specifically in their secondary application essays. They're wanting to know, how has COVID affected you? And so here's a very cheap way of you saying, I had a job as a medical scribe that ended with COVID. I had to find another job because financially I'm on my own. Here's what I was able to find. And here's the things that I've really learned, both in terms of my medical scribing, but also in this new job. And it's not going to be like, oh, well, we're throwing her out. She doesn't have any experience or whatever. she should have looked harder for another medical related. No, it's not going to work that way. I think there's going to be a whole lot of wiggle room involved in this application cycle with the effects of COVID on the applicants. So I wouldn't worry. Certainly, it's not going to look bad. And I think, if anything, the way that you talk about it could be a very positive thing.
Yeah, and remember that what you choose to do for work to pay the bills, while that doesn't have to be medically related, you should and can still be doing things on the side.
Yeah.
Whether that's some volunteering in the ED once every couple weeks or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
There are those opportunities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, let me just highlight, if I may, Ryan.
You may.
I will. My weekly blog on the Mapped website. I write a weekly blog, and this week it comes out every Wednesday. It's called Wednesday Wisdom. It's a little, wisdom, maybe. So but this week's blog entry that will be put up this coming Wednesday is about COVID, and it's about how we're reacting to COVID as a society, but also as individuals. And so I'd encourage you to read the blog. Read the blogs each week. I think they're pretty good, but there it is right there. Last week was on ethical. Last week was about symbolism, and then we've had one about ethics, and then a variety of others. And so just check those out at your leisure. They take really literally about 5 minutes to read. They're not long. They're very easy to read, but they raise questions, which is my intention. They raise questions, and they always end with a call to action. What does this mean? I challenge you to do something at the end of the blog each week that potentially will help you in your experiences. So this week's about COVID.
Hey, Rachel, I'm adding you to the stream. I think we should have Scott turn those into little podcasts. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can do that for sure.
I think so. Good.
Yeah,
all right.
That'd be awesome.
Done. All right.
Woohoo.
More podcasts. Woohoo.
Never enough. And actually, that reminds me of a moment in The Good Place when the judge is like walking away. It's like one of those walk away jokes. And I won't, no spoilers, I promise. But as she's walking away from the conversation, she puts on her headphones and she goes, "There's millions of podcasts and they just keep coming."
So good.
And that's just from Ryan.
Ouch. I have a problem, okay? I'm seeking help.
That's so funny.
All right. Well, next question.
I have already applied this year, but taking the MCAT on 8/14 due to several COVID-19 cancellations, my MCAT score was steadily increasing in the 500s with my blueprint test, formerly Next Step Test Prep. But I recently took 2 AAMC tests with improvements, but were drastically lower, under 500s. The next available date, 9/3, and any advice on what to do? I'm trying to figure out the score. So MCAT scores were increasing in the 500s, 2 AAMC tests with improvements, but were drastically lower, under 500s. How is that with improvements?
Yeah, I don't get that.
I'm confused.
Part, yeah.
Maybe compared to their old AAMC tests? That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, maybe so.
Rachel, is that what you assume?
Yeah, that's also how I read it. Like maybe those were retakes.
Yeah, so retakes is always the question mark, right? How long ago did you take the test, and is that a standardized score? Because if it's a retake of a practice test, or if it's like I took full length 1, full length 2, and did not so good, I took full length 3 and 4, I did better, but still under 500.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Rachel, you're the MCAT expert, but my general response to this is you're not ready to take the test.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my gut read too. I stayed on camera because I figured I was going to be chiming in on this one. I know that's really it's a hard thing to hear when it's August and we're coming to the end of an application cycle. I don't think all hope is lost, but this is this kind of wild swings, I mean, you didn't, to the person asking, you didn't give specifics. So we could be wrong because we don't have all the data. But if you're swinging as far as, say, 506 to 496, then the first thing I think you need to do is be looking at if those swings are specific to sections. And you mentioned you're taking Blueprint exams. I don't know if it's still up, but they used to have on the Blueprint website, somewhere on their MCAT blog, a really helpful article that was like, how do I know if I'm ready? And it actually helps you break down your recent full-length exams by section and sort of try to take the emotion out of it and do a mathematical assessment. So I would definitely go search their blog and see if that's still there. It probably is, because I feel like they've kept all that stuff archived.
Yeah.
And that might help you come to a decision with a little less emotion. And then maybe for this person who's asking, or maybe for other people, this is part of why we advise whenever possible that you get your MCAT done before you actually submit send on applications, because what you want to avoid is being in this exact position. And I know COVID made it worse. Hey, we found it. Am I ready to take the MCAT part 1? And there's a part 2 also.
Yeah.
But it just sort of walks you through, obviously ignore your diagnostic, ignore a full length you took 3 months ago. But if you look at your last 4 or 5 full lengths by section, that starts to give you a better sense of the pattern of your success. And I guess what I would also say to this person who's probably thinking, but I don't know if I'm ready to give up, I might still want to take it in either 11 days or reschedule to September 3rd, make sure you are spending twice as long reviewing your practice tests as you're spend taking them. Doesn't sound to me like you need to take any more tests right now. I think what you need to do is a lot of test review where you are checking every question, whether you got it right or wrong, and making a note of the pattern. So if I got it right, why? What was the key takeaway? If I got it wrong, did I narrow down to 2 and guess wrong? Did I have no clue? Did I make a sloppy mistake? You need to try to find some patterns and then work on improving from those patterns.
Yeah, that's a very long-term future thing that I would love built into Mapped, is doing MCAT full-length review and going, like, we would probably know what the right answers are, so it doesn't really matter. So question 1, right or wrong, right, why'd you get it right, and have a lot of breakdown and notes, and we can give some good data from that. So might be interesting for the future. Yeah, I would, number one, I probably would, without a doubt, reschedule to September 3rd, because right now AAMC has waived, at least as far as I know, has waived all their rescheduling fees and all that stuff. So reschedule, it's not going to cost you anything. I would rather you have a 505 scored out mid-September than a 500 or 498 scored out at the end of August. So push that back, keep chugging along, and if you need to pull the plug for this cycle, pull the plug. I wouldn't go down the path what is known as sunk costs, the fallacy of sunk costs. I think it's the exact term, fallacy of sunk costs, where you, in your brain, you've determined, well, I've already applied, right? So I've already paid that money. I've already worked towards that. Therefore, I should probably just take the MCAT, right? That logic, that logic of sunk costs usually leads to just worse outcomes. So
agreed.
Separate yourself from having already applied and go, am I ready to take the MCAT or not? That's the only question you're asking yourself, regardless of applying.
Agreed.
And good luck.
And good luck. Yes. Best wishes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we sure hope it works out for you. All right, next question. Well,
I'm a huge fan of the sunk costs stuff.
I see
it all the time.
In so many aspects of your life. You already spent that money. You already made that decision for good or ill. They even touch on it in Frozen 2. What's the next right thing I can do?
That's exactly it. I love that. I love it.
Man, we're really into Kristen Bell around here.
I've never seen Frozen 2 and I've never seen Frozen 1.
Well, you have some catching up to do, Scott.
What?
Sorry,
He
I'm
doesn't have
just.
4-year-olds in his life like you and I do.
Wasn't that in his employee contract?
All right, wait. I really want to put this question up because it's a good one. Here we go.
Here we go. I was doing counseling/social work, but I got very sick, and this gave me the aha moment of doing medicine. I still work with this population of high-risk women and plan on continuing working with this population. Should I include some of my social work experience in my personal statement and this shift in type of care because it has shaped me so much? It's a slam dunk for me, Scott.
Go for it.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the good stuff. This is what you want to talk about. Absolutely.
Who you are and how'd you get to where you are. And
Yep.
so this is a confusing part, and I'll clarify it because a lot of students get confused by this, especially after reading my book, which I didn't think was confusing. But so this whole seed kind of example that I give, the metaphor that I give, is one where students think that the seed has to be what led me to being a physician. And I always have to clarify, say, no, the seed in general is healthcare. And so for this person, her seed is her social work, her clinical, her whatever that other word was, the social work. So that's her seed. And then obviously something else happened, and then she had the aha moment, and she reflected back on what she was doing and was like, I need more. I need more education and more impact, and I need to broaden my horizons. So, yeah, definitely, it's a huge part of your journey. So I think it goes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another very common mistake is just to put it out there is a lot of students will focus on why not the social work, right? Versus why I want to be a physician. They'll focus on all the stuff that social work didn't give them. I'm like, I don't need to know why you don't like what you were doing. I want to know why you want to be a doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff.
We got another MCAT one.
Ooh, MCAT. Studying for the MCAT now, and I am following your advice from the MCAT podcast. Ooh, one of my millions, about the Psych Soc outline, and I was wondering if you had talked to Phil about approximately how long this process will take. I am around 30% done with the outline and test end of September. Feel like it should be enough. Your thoughts? I actually haven't talked to Phil about how long it would take. Rachel, do you have any thoughts?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is it to get through the Psych Soc outline in the podcast?
No. So Phil has a very specific, process for Psych Soc, where like 20-ish% of the students that he works with get a perfect score on Psych Soc.
Okay.
And so it's going through the AAMC outline,
Yep.
line by line, point by point, and making sure you understand everything in it.
Got it. Yeah.
So how long that will take, it probably depends on every student and how much time they have to dedicate to it.
Yeah, well, and also what this person doesn't offer is when they began, right? So, I mean, everyone learns differently. Everyone has a different amount of time they can give per day, per week.
Yep.
And then I think, I always get the students who say, well, I'm going to give 14 hours a day. And I'm like, yeah, but at what point do you just hit input overload?
Yep.
I can do 14-hour days and learn, but can I do them for 7 weeks? Yep. I can't. I mean, maybe you can. But somewhere in there, I need breaks. I'm not saying that's what you took. I just mean this is why sometimes these questions are hard to answer because there's so many different factors in how long something is going to take.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're going through the outline and you feel like, I mean, from the way you've worded the question, it seems like you think you're on a good track. That's great.
Yep.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Do it.
We've got another one. Oh, this is from the person who was asking about would it raise a red flag if they started their clinical work 5 months before they applied. Yep. So a little follow-up to clarify the question. I don't know if it'll change the answer, but we'll put it out there because other people might be thinking the same thing.
Yep. Follow-up, this is because I was involved in research and I explored other passions I had. I also did work part-time all 4 years. Do you still recommend taking a gap year? Explaining the situation might not raise the red flag. So the other passions. So for me, the question is, were you exploring the other passions because you weren't sure you wanted to be a physician? In which case now you're jumping on board saying, okay, I'm ready to apply. That timeline still seems very rushed to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And my question would be, so you were doing research and you said you were exploring other passions. So I'm wondering, how did you explore other passions? And did you explore other passions by doing things in those passions that helped you know that that wasn't something you wanted to really pursue? And if that's true, why didn't you do that with medicine at the same time?
Yep. Yeah.
So why
you were doing that excluding medicine?
Yeah.
Why couldn't you include it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
That's
I don't think it changes my feeling about this question.
No.
And then, I mean, again, this may or may not help the original question asker, but just for everyone listening, if this fellow had a time machine, or if we're listening to someone who's a rising freshman or a rising second year, or if you're a non-trad, you're 3 or 4 years out from hoping to start med school, when do you guys recommend people start getting clinical experience?
Right away.
As soon as you go, maybe I want to be a doctor.
Yeah, right away.
Yeah.
Why wait? Yeah.
Right. No, I knew that would be the answer, but I wanted to make sure that was clear. So, I mean, what we're saying here is that that's a priority because as Ryan, I've heard you word it this way so many times, you're proving to yourself that you really want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Do it early, do it consistently, keep doing it.
Yeah.
I had a conversation last week with a 50-plus-year-old lawyer, and he wants to be a physician. His dad died suddenly a few years ago, and he just kind of had this epiphany, like, I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. And his first step was to go back and take classes, and he hasn't gotten any clinical experience or shadowing. And I said, how the heck do you know that you really want to be a physician? You had this obviously tragic event in your life, and that sparked some reflection in your mind, and you jumped at medicine, but is that really what you want? And so when I say, and Scott, when you say as soon as possible, when I say like as soon as you have that idea, it's not for medical schools. It's to make sure that you're not wasting your time doing all these med school prereqs, and you go, oh, this isn't what medicine, what I thought medicine was like. Yeah, I was just cleaning up poop and pee all day long. The doctors just sit behind the computer all day long talking to the insurance companies. This isn't fun, right? You have to go out and get that experience. It's so many students have this jaded outlook about what medical school admissions is, and they think it's just jumping through hoops for the admissions office, and it's not. It's for you. Yeah. It's for you.
Absolutely.
Soapbox off.
Yeah.
All right. I'm really stressed about getting clinical experience because it seems like every hospital job requires some sort of prior experience or certification that I don't have. In terms of volunteering, there's no guarantee that hospital volunteers would give me the patient interaction I want. COVID also makes it impossible to get near patients. Any advice? Thanks, COVID.
Yeah, right. Damn COVID. Well, I think that my experience with pre-med students has always been that they want to get something that is exciting and gives them all kinds of cool interactions and everything from the get-go.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work that way.
I don't know if it's a generation thing, but it seems like everyone wants to start at the top.
At the top.
Like, why do I have to go through all this training? I just want to be a doctor already.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think you got to start where you can start, and you start volunteering. And if that means you're answering the phone in the waiting room, then that's what you do. And you work your way into other things, and you show that you're a hard worker. And so I think you have to start where you can start, and then you begin to network with the doctor or with other doctors, and you build things. It's like a career. It's like any kind of career where you don't start as a CEO unless you're Ryan, of course. But you go. No, I'm kidding.
7 years in the making, buddy.
Right, true. That is true. But you have to start where you can start, and then you build from that. And so don't expect that you're going to be, watching open heart surgery the first day you go in and do something.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't work that way.
Yep. 1,000%. All right. I think that's another Ask the Dean in the books.
In the books.
Episode 11, I think this was, Rachel, right?
Wow.
Episode 11. So
Yeah,
we got 12 next week.
Awesome.
And hopefully by next week, we'll have several hundred people inside of Mapped working and playing around, breaking things. So I thank you all for being here and hanging out with us and going on this journey with us.
We love you. And, we keep safe out there. I'm going to put my mask on. So encourage everybody to wear their masks while they're out and about, and be safe. Keep yourself safe. Keep your family safe. And, we'll get through this.
Take care, guys. Bye.
All right.